Yeah, she had a very interesting childhood. I think it was either last year or maybe it was the year before. Her parents were actually canonized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So she was raised by very holy parents, and she had 4 other sisters, all of whom were nuns. I think one right now was recently beatified too. So quite the family, kind of a Hall of Fame caliber family as far as saints go. But yeah, she was born in France. She's from France. She's the youngest doctor of the church.
Yeah.
You know, she died at age, I think she was 24, 25 years old when she died. So she was pretty young, yeah. But, yeah, her father tried to be a priest, but he was denied because he didn't know enough Latin to be a priest. Like I said, her mother was a very holy person too, and they were both canonized together as a couple a couple of years ago. And, her mother died when she was very young too.
Yeah.
So it was a very hard time in her life. And she suffered from all kinds of bouts of like, I guess you would call it depression nowadays. She said that she was a sad child, and she would go in fits of crying out of nowhere, and she had a lot of sadness in her life. And very hard life, I guess, in late 19th century France.
Yeah. And I believe at that time in France it was more like, this fear of God had been indoctrinated in people, that God was harsh and he was harsh, and so that was the time that was going on when they were Catholic.
Yeah, France still was kind of suffering from the after effects of Jansenism, you know, which is kind of like this throughout Europe, but it was really focused in France, and it was really this angry God. It was kind of like a Catholic form of Calvinism, you know, this real angry God that was he was just out there to punish everyone and really, I don't know, like you were born into this world as some sort of cosmic trick to be able to punish you later on or something like that. So, yeah, there was the after effects of Jansenism, which had already been condemned as a heresy probably 100 years earlier, but it's still kind of like lingering effects of it.
Yeah. What about her, you've given us about her background, but what about the challenges that she faced? I mean, she had her sisters leaving off and going to the convent, and she was going through all of these changes. So what exactly was the hardship or challenge in her life?
Well, from reading a few different sources of her, I've read that she was sick often throughout her entire life, really, because she died of tuberculosis. But she was sick as an infant up until, I don't think she lived with her parents until she was even like 2 years old. And then all throughout her childhood, she suffered from different illnesses and stuff. Yeah. And so, on top of that, she also suffered from severe scrupulosity. Yeah. And that's where even though you confess a sin or you're forgiven of a sin, you kind of like obsess over it, you know? And that's probably part of that after effect of Jansenism like we were talking about. Yeah. But she was very scrupulous. Yeah. And I've known people that have had scrupule. I've, had it myself sometimes, like, oh gosh, did I do that right this time? So it's something you gotta kind of fight against. But then the opposite is laxity, where it's just like anything goes. Yeah. So you gotta, the golden mean. You gotta shoot for. But she had a very tough childhood.
And it's good that you pointed it out, because if you actually read the story of her soul, you find, oh my gosh, she's just a child, and what is she talking about? But when you see it from this point of view, you realize, okay, she did have a problem, that she was really suffering with something, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In her entire life, she's pretty young, but then she manages to say so many things. She manages to write books, and even through her sickness, write all of her thoughts down. So what are the most important things that she has taught us through her writing and through her life?
Well, that anyone can be a saint is, I think, really the most important thing she taught us, because, she's 24 years old when she dies, and she joined the convent at 15 or 16 years old when she joined the convent. And the thing, too, that's amazing about it is the nuns that were in the convent with her were completely unaware that they were in the presence of a saint. Yeah. They just thought she was just a normal, everyday nun. They didn't know she had this great spirituality. And she kind of kept it it was in her interior life. But it was we don't have to do like St. Paul type missionary journeys. We don't have to travel to the ends of the world. We can just be kind to the homeless person on the corner, or we can just smile at somebody. That's what she talked about, her little way, and the little way to heaven, and just everything you do, no matter what it is, if it's smiling at a stranger, if it's, giving the waitress an extra $1 tip, or just telling someone, just saying hello to somebody, just any little thing you do, if you do it for God, that really, it can change the world. And that's what inspired a little Albanian woman that joined a convent in Ireland and moved to India, Saint Teresa. She actually was inspired by the little way in the story of the soul, and that's why she took the name Teresa when she became a nun, was because of Therese of Lisieux. And look what she done. We can't all do great things, but we can do little things with great love.
Yeah.
That's her famous quote, and that's straight out of Therese of Lisieux's playbook.
If anybody wants to emulate her in the sense of doing the little way, explain to people what exactly is this little way. I mean, I know you've given examples already, but just define it for people who don't understand this kind of spirituality.
From what I gather of it, it's literally just doing little things. It isn't. We can't all, like I said, we can't all be great.
Yeah.
She knew she was just a young nun living in out of the way corner of France.
Yeah.
That she wasn't gonna do anything great as far as but she could share the gospel with somebody, or she could do these different things, and that was what she understood to be. She said she wanted to find a little way to heaven because she was too small to climb the great steps to heaven. So she wanted to find. She compared it like to an elevator. Mm-hmm. And she said rich people have these elevators in their houses nowadays. I guess elevators was a new invention back then. But she said they have these elevators, they don't have to bother with the stairs. She said, well, I want to find an elevator to heaven. Mm-hmm. And that elevator is Christ's arms. I'm going to allow him to lift me to heaven by doing, by just cooperating with his grace in every little way I can.
And I think just to let people know, I believe she was a cloistered nun, right?
Yes, I think so.
So there's no...
Oh, she's a Carmelite.
Yeah, she's a Carmelite. So there's no actually go out and go on missions and help people and do great things. I mean, everything had to be done within the walls of the convent.
Right. Yeah. And cloistered nuns, that's their whole thing is prayer. Yeah. They just pray. They pray for the church. They pray for the Pope. They pray for all the world, basically. They pray for everyone.
Apart from the little way, she's also had a lot of writings about I think the child Jesus. I mean, she focuses, because of this constant fear in France at the time, she talked about loving God who came as a child. And do you have any thoughts on that as well?
It was on, I think it was Christmas Eve, when she was like 13 or 14 years old, when she had this like epiphany of the child Jesus. Yeah. And that's where she decided that she wanted to dedicate her life to him. And that was her actual religious name that she took was Therese of the child Jesus. Yeah. So she was really dedicated to Jesus as a child. It really is. I don't know. When you think about it, when I think about Jesus, I usually think like first image in my mind is like Good Friday, or Passion, or things like that. Or I seen when I was in Israel one time, I seen a crucifix, and it was Jesus dressed in like royal. It was a carving in a church. Mm-hmm. It was dressed in like royal robes with a crown on, nailed to a cross at the same time. And it was really like that, dramatic King of the universe, Savior of the world kind of. Yeah. But she sees Jesus as this helpless infant. Mm-hmm. And it really is, like, that is just as amazing as Christ dying for us. Yeah. Is Christ taking on flesh for us in the first place. Yeah. Just coming, he didn't come like, he could have just appeared on earth as a 30-year-old, man. Yeah. But he didn't. He appeared as a newborn baby. That's how he came. He came as, he didn't even come as a newborn baby. He came as a fetus, an embryo in his mother. And then went through the whole pregnancy, the whole entire human experience. Yeah. But she's seen him as a child, and that is, like I said, that's just as powerful as King of the Universe or ruling. I guess because I'm a man, I see more of like the powerful. She's seen more of the meek. Yeah. And it really is, it's good to think of it that way too. Jesus is the King of the Universe, but also he came down.
You can't say that what I'm going through is different from what Christ went through, because he went through exactly everything that you go through as a human being.
Right, yeah. Yeah, he was fully human and fully divine. Yeah. Like, he actually had the full range of human emotion. And he really showed that, too, in the agony of the garden, where he was sweating blood. And he was praying to let this cup pass, because he knew what was coming. Yeah. And he knew what was going to happen and everything, but he was willing to accept it for our sake. I like that the one story about her is she tried to enter the convent at 15 and they rebuffed her. They said, no, you're too, or I think at 14 even. And then at 15, no, you're too young. And the convent I don't know what his actual title would be, but basically the priest in charge, he said, well, you can always go to the bishop. And I guess he never assumed that she would actually go to the bishop. So then she travels into the town and goes to the bishop. And she tries to convince the bishop, and the bishop's like, let's think about it a little bit, because you're only 15 years old. It's awful young to be making a lifelong decision.
Yeah.
So that year, she goes with her family on pilgrimage to Rome. It was Pope St. Leo XIII's 50th anniversary of being a priest.
Yeah. And
she goes to Rome. And while there, you know how they go up, you get to go up and kiss the ring, and just kind of like a papal audience, but it was just they were supposed to be rushing everyone through. And you weren't supposed to talk. And she just burst out and said, please, Your Holiness, let me enter the convent. Mm-hmm. And he laughed at this little girl, 15-year-old girl, saying, let me enter a convent. So he said, if it's God's will, you'll enter the convent. And she pleaded with him, and she never let up. She was very persistent. She knew what she wanted, and she was persistent about it. Mm-hmm. And we really have to be persistent, too, when if you know what something's right, and you know if something really feels right, and you go after it, you can't let yourself get discouraged by a minor setback.
And that's very common to a lot of the saints, right? I mean, that they are persistent. They've got this singular focus on doing whatever it is. I mean,
that's what makes them a saint. That singular focus on doing the will of God. And that's we do well to adopt that in our lives.
Okay, so I'll just give people a tip about this, because I'm a total skeptic when it comes to novenas. But somebody told me that if you do this novena, she kind of showers you with roses. And I thought this was just total nonsense. I thought, but I did the novena, and I can tell you for a fact that you see roses everywhere. Even when you're not looking, you either get a rose, or you see a rose, or, it's like roses all the time for the entire 9 days that you do the novena. And that's something that, if you're a skeptic, just try this once, and you'll be convinced about her as a saint.
About the intercession of the saints.
Yeah. Anything else that you have? Tell us about where you read about her, because I read The Story of a Soul, which was her, I think her biography, and then her sister, who was a superior, added on to that.
Yeah, The Story of the Soul, she actually wrote, 3 separate letters that was kind of compiled after she died by her sister into a book. And the funny thing is, too, that her sister, when she made that book, she only thought it was going to have a very, not a very wide audience, basically. She thought it was going to be just to Carmelite nuns to read, to kind of help them buff up on what they should be doing as nuns, and maybe to a few religious around the world or things like that. But it ended up becoming a bestseller, and really that's what propelled her to her canonization. Really, it was just so much wisdom in this book that a person that was 50 years studying philosophy and theology hadn't really wrote something like this. And here was a 25-year-old girl that really, how much schooling would she have even had, too, if she went into a convent at 15? And yet she wrote this book that's still one of the most widely read Catholic books in the world today.
And she ended up being the doctor of the church, I mean.
Yeah, a doctor of the church. That's a pretty... How many doctors? I think there's only 32 or 33 doctors, and only 5 of them's women. And here she is, 24 years old. Yeah. And she's a doctor of the church. That's pretty amazing. Pretty good achievement.
Show that God can use anyone at any place, at any time, no matter how old or young or strong or what your past is or whatever,
Or how unfit for the job you are. Here was a sick girl that, 24 years old, she died. And so most people, you wouldn't take advice from an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old. Yeah. But here she is giving spiritual advice to people all around the world to this day, reading her book.
Any other books that you read on her, or any other sources that you think would be...
there's a website. There's actually a shrine to her that I visited one time. I never got to go inside. It was closed. It's in San Antonio, Texas.
Oh, okay.
But there's a website. I think it's littleflower.org, and it's really just... It's a wealth of information as far as... St. Therese of Lisieux is concerned.
Okay, all right.
I think it's littleflower.org.